While we sit and go.
Yep, while we sit and stare.
For the light.
Oh.
Yeah, it's on there.
That's awesome. So what is
Well, yeah,
the,
what's
currently
the
says
delay?
we're
What are we waiting
offline.
for?
so when is it recording?
Oh, it's there, right? It's on.
Is it just the audio, the red light? I don't know. Anyway,
I
all
don't
right.
know. Online, it went from offline to starting, so. I don't know.
Okay, welcome back to all of our YouTube watchers. Okay, so now we're gonna go back to item number 3 on our agenda, which is the general plan amendments regarding moderate income housing, and I will turn the time over to staff.
See if I pull up the document. That's the amendments in the staff report. I hope you're a bit confused because it was quite an endeavor to look at the model from the state. So just kind of backing up to the matter at hand, we're looking at our general plan amendment, and have noticed for that general plan amendment, and just for your information, we did double notice for the city council for the 19th because we are trying to hit the December 1st deadline. But I don't want that to pressure you, because if you're uncomfortable with something, then that's the issue and we need to address it. Hopefully you're not uncomfortable. Basically there's 2 fundamentals that are happening here. Out of Senate Bill 34, we're required to meet certain expectations under our moderate income housing. It's supposed to be done by December 1st of 2019. Then later, we're supposed to take our moderate income housing plan, integrate it with our transportation plan, and then we're to report December 1st, 2020 for our first annual report that will have to go out. Instead of every other year, it'll now happen every year. And then we have further to post that on the city's website, both the general plan and our reports on moderate income housing. So Lisa's gone through. I think she again attached later this afternoon, or earlier this afternoon, the edits that she recommended the language, because my document's only showing you the simple markup of the changes. So you can see for that one. You did have that at your last meeting. I don't know if you perused it or not, but that we're changing that, and my current version is just showing where things are being edited. So you're seeing a lot of structural changes to it to come into compliance with Senate Bill 34. Lisa's also gone through, and we've just listed out the state strategies. There's some mandatory strategies, and then there's other strategies you can select from. Lisa's listed all of those out as availability, and then I believe later in her edits, she's gone to what we've had as strategies and reformatted those from our existing as structurally meeting the choices made under Senate Bill 34. What I have done is taken the table sections and edited them so it's matching two documents. The first document is updating the numbers, because the numbers in the current element are 2012. And so I'm updating some of those numbers that are structural in the plan to the 2017 biennial report that was submitted to the state, and I think it was attached. It should be attached with your attachments to see that report. The second numbers driven out of the table in Senate Bill 34 is requiring us to look at future 5 years out. So 2024, we have to look at. They've provided a projection model, a 5-year projection model, and they've encouraged through our training programs to use that model. You don't have to use the model, but a lot of cities are relying on it because the data generation is significant. And it's so significant that sometimes I had to call the state like 5 times and say, what is this saying? Because it's not ringing a bell with me when you look in the projection model. And they're basically using, for the most part, the American Survey 2017 data to generate the projections in that report. So if you go to the American Survey data off the census, they're taking that, they've created a algorithm, and then they've gone through each community. You'll see in that attachment, each community has been generated. And so we're using the county AMI, that's our requirement, data, and we're comparing it to the American Survey data of 2017 in that 5-year projection model. As I went through the model, and see, you can ask questions you want, and I'll try to answer them, but essentially what's changing in the Senate bill is we used to do 80% of the median income of the county. It's now requiring us to do 80, 50, and 30. So that's, although there are some projections that we've done in the past on it, that's now a mandatory projection in there. So when you look at the projection and look at the 2018 numbers in the model that they're showing, we've made progress in the 80%. We have an excess in their projection model of 39 units or whatever the number comes out to be in that project. So in some sense, some of our effort, intentional or not intentional, because I don't know all the rent rates out there, because they're fairly significant. The model's predicting that we've made progress in the 80. If you look at the 50 and the 30, it doesn't tell us we've made any progress. It's actually a significant deficit, obviously, the lower you go. Then they give a projection in their algorithm of what 2024 should look like. The problem with that projection is it projects only at a renter base under the survey. We're not getting the mortgage base. I'm not sure we're going to get where we get all the mortgage base and a fair model for that projection. But I was comfortable with the numbers because if you look at their 2017 American Survey data, they did give a cost burden. So the cost burden is anything that exceeds 30% cost in housing and rents. If it burdens those households above 30%, it's considered burden. So if you look at the table, they do have some preliminary mortgage costs, and it's showing that the mortgage owners are not exceeding the 30% burden. But in the renter category as a whole, so it's not dividing it out 80, 50, 30, just as a whole, it's burdened at 52 or something like percent in the model. So we know the renter from the data is definitively the issue with the cost burden. And so then going to the projection model and using it only renter-based, that's where the calculation comes up of how many units were needed in the future. And so with the deficit of the 50 and 30% AMI, the positive, slight positive in the 80%, subtracting that out for the projected data of 2024, it comes up with 411 units, or negative 411 units. And so that's the best I can understand the data. I'm not even sure I can answer all your questions if you have them, because it took me a while to understand what they were trying to do, because they have just all kinds of non-necessary reporting data that you can look at. But what I really was focusing on, instead of all of the other data, which is useful for creating realistic strategies maybe, we're not really at the point of useful realistic strategies in its entirety. We have those concept goals listed in our element, but I think we need to have more roll-ups on the sleeve when we match it to our transportation plan and reset those goals. So rather than try to come in and reset goals, we structurally are generally sound. We'll come back. The projection of the 2024 is what I was trying to meet, and what's our deficit. And 411 units according to the projection model. Then we can go back to our transportation plan and our moderate income housing plan in springtime, spring to summer, in preparation for the report of 2020, and maybe use the other data in the projections as some strategic modeling, looking at the state strategies and which ones we're going to go after. So as confusing as it was to me, I hope there was some clarity in the end for you.
Clear as mud. Thanks, Corey.
If I could, just a comment. So I did attach today an actual red line of my suggested changes, because I think what happened in the attachment is it just highlighted a paragraph that was changed, but all of that paragraph is not new, and it also does not show what was deleted.
Right.
So if you could look at the specific red lines, we're not adding as much as it looks like if you thought that was just a red line. It's just highlighting any paragraph that was changed at all, but most of it we're just adding
Yeah, I think on the projection model area, I changed the entire language in the background of the goal.
Oh, yeah, I'm just talking about the text, yeah, sorry, just
Yeah.
my text changes, but,
Yeah.
so what I did, I just went through the statute, to make a good faith effort to comply with SB 34. There were some things in our code that needed to be changed, you know, for instance, we say that we're just gonna look at this biennially. By statute, we now have to look at it annually, so we don't wanna be out of compliance with that. And just adding that laundry list of options. And I think as staff, we've discussed, obviously, we need more changes than this, but these are quick fixes to bring us into strict compliance with the changes. But I think we really need to analyze in more detail which of those options we want to pick and which we want to get serious about implementing over the next 5 years. I just proposed, and I need to make this very clear, in our optional strategies, I went ahead and just picked 4 that seemed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I actually picked 5 out of the list of 23 that I thought Centerville was already doing, or would be easy to do, or it was already in our general plan to do. And those are set forth on page 4, of my red line version, those. These are the things that I'm saying Centerville will work on, and I put 5 in case the planning commission wants to recommend reducing those. We have to pick at least 3.
Lisa, I apologize because I printed mine before you updated your red lines, so I don't actually have the changes. Can you just identify for me out of the
Yes, so
state
out
statutes
of,
which
out
5 you
of the
selected?
new optional list of 25 or 23 options, these are the suggestions for these amendments. Rezone for densities necessary to assure the production of moderate income housing.
5A.
So we're rezoning, which,
Is that 5A?
5A,
Oh.
yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant, I see what you're saying.
out of
In
the
case
options.
you were
These are existing
Yeah.
policies, and
I
she's
am-
repeating them.
I am
I
looking
thought you
exactly
found
at that,
something else,
Logan.
So that's 5A, so I picked 5A.
Okay,
Create or allow for and reduce regulations relating to accessory dwelling units in residential zones.
so
I think
5E,
we've talked about that.
okay.
So I'll write these down, 5A, 5E. Allow for higher density or moderate income residential development in commercial and mixed-use zones, commercial centers or employment centers. We have done that on the west side in our mixed-use zone, so I think that's something we can comply with. Preserve existing moderate income housing, also something I think we can comply with and that we're doing.
Yeah,
And-
our RDA funds have to be used in some senses for the housing, and we've used them in CBD grants for like Pheasant Brook in their drainage system.
Right.
Cedar Springs, I think we did a project in.
And this last one I'm a little mixed on, but again, I wanted to give just going through the list, I thought this was one we could maybe do, is reduce impact fees related to low and moderate income housing. It's not that simple to reduce your impact fees because somebody has to pay those, because our modeling is dependent on that, so it's probably coming from the city general funds if we do provide an impact fee reduction. But again, these are just things to work on, so that's what I really think. I wanted to highlight that we actually have to pick 3, and I've given you 5 to make your recommendations to the council on. Or you could even add some more if you want to read through that list and add more.
I thought 5W was quite achievable. Any other program or strategy implemented by the municipality to address the housing needs of residents?
That's just a
I
catch-all.
love that level of requirement. Like, my wife says, you got X or Y.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
I guess we could add that one too.
It's just a suggestion.
Get credit for any other kind of idea that we come up with, I mean.
That's right. I mean,
So.
that's great.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? Since I am not seeing your red lines, Lisa, under the background section on page 1 of 18, there's a reference to the City Council and Planning Commission's updated priorities of the 2012-2013 list. That just seemed a little outdated. Or wait, did you take that out?
I did not, but I agree that was sort of my comment that, so you could make a suggestion to that.
So
Let's see, therefore, both the planning commission and city council have deemed it a priority to update the city's moderate income housing element
I would just
I
take
think you
out the
say
last,
period, yeah.
just take out that last sentence entirely, and if you want to, you could say, from the initial adoption of the plan element through November of 2019, there has not been a significant reassessment of moderate income housing status for the city, period. And that catches us up at least through current times. I don't know if we really need to reference November of 2019, because then you're going to be updating it again the next time that you do it, but that struck me as a remnant that wasn't really applicable.
So just strike the last, I mean, I probably wouldn't
So-
even reference 2019, because that's just going to become obsolete.
Yeah, so
So-
just strike that last sentence.
Last sentence, okay.
Did anyone else have any other comments on the revised language? You know, I did notice as it was walking through all of the things that when we were summarizing the efforts that we've made strategically, all of the things in the last 10 years have been pushing out to the west side, right? I mean, all of those are, oh, let's just deal with it on the west side. And I think that that is, I mean, that was a strategy, but I would encourage us to be a little more open-minded about fulfilling some of our moderate income housing issues in other parts of the city. I mean, when you look at the survey units, you see that we actually have 20% of our community is townhomes and duplexes. And I think that those fit in really well with our community. And so perhaps if our community is really concerned about multifamily housing, one way that we could address the moderate income housing issue in a way that is comfortable for our residents is to look at more duplexes, more townhome duplex type developments, you know, and infill those in other places rather than just trying to push all the density out to the west side. Anyway, for what it's worth.
Yeah, but we've, I mean, since then, we've done some developments west of Main Street, but east of the freeway, right? Like the whole Hafoka development was supposed to be a moderate income. I don't know if it ended up being that because Corey keeps reminding us that some of those units go for quite a bit of money, but.
Yeah, that's true. You know, maybe we could put that in to our list of things. Is that? I
Yeah,
don't
you
know.
can put that in.
I mean, you raise a good point.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to see what the old Dick's property ends up doing. You know, those are not going to necessarily be cheap homes, but they're going to be starter homes in a lot of ways, right? Like I don't know if you've noticed or not, but they got one house that's pretty well framed up and roughed in, and they got the foundation for the next one over there. They're going to be kind of tight. They're going to be not a lot of land there, so
Yeah.
those. You're definitely not going to be paying for land. So I don't know, I'd be interested to see what those ones do in terms of that. And again, like we mentioned before, this 60-unit development up north could trickle down, right, Logan?
No, yes. What I mean is, people like Thomas who have a ton of money, they see this and they say, "Oh, I want to live in that," so they move out of their house,
Right.
and then Thomas's shack that he lives in now becomes available for the likes of me
Ouch.
to jump in. And just kidding,
No, it's true. It creates
It's a
sup-
chain.
It creates a supply.
Trickle down has some baggage. I refuse to use that one, but yeah, it's a chain, a chain effect.
I contend it's still valid.
You
Trickle
know,
down.
we do note on page 5, though, that the region is predicted to continue growing and that 2/3 of the growth is expected to come from kids growing up and settling in this area and starting families, right? 2/3 of the growth is going to be us, our
And the other
kids.
third is California, I think. right?
Yeah, or elsewhere.
I just visited. It's California.
So, any other comments? Are you guys, do you all feel comfortable with recommending the 5 or I guess 6? Do we want to include that 6th one? 5W, why not?
Why not?
That one doesn't seem like it's a bad one to throw into the mix.
Doesn't cost us anything, right?
Any pushback or concern on that?
No.
Anything else that we want to offer comment-wise?
No, do we need a motion to send this to the planning or to the city council?
Do we-
And
Recommendation.
you have to have a public hearing.
We will, we'll get there. On page 18, 6-1.1, this is providing continued support for the limited use of flag lot development. We don't allow for flag lot development.
Well, it does say consider.
It'll come back.
I mean, I'm actually in favor of flag lot development, but I don't think that we currently allow it, so maybe that's not consistent with.
You could always treat it as consider and then unconsider and then consider
Well, I
and
think
then
it's, I think it's
unconsider.
a reasonable objective to consider it, to look at it.
Well, no, but it
and-
doesn't say consider it. It says provide continued support for the limited use of.
Oh,
Yeah, and
yeah,
right
that's
now,
the
there's
first one.
no
And right now there is
continued
no-
support.
there is
So maybe
no
just consider support
Consider
for limited use of
Support
flag
for,
lot.
yeah.
Yeah, good catch, sorry.
yeah.
I was-
This was written just after we adopted the flag lot
Oh, yeah.
ordinance.
Oh, yeah, change that, good call.
Okay. Well, this matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, so I will go ahead and take the opportunity to open a public hearing. Invite any member of the public who wishes to step forward to speak to this matter. Seeing no one present, I'll close the public hearing. Any other feedback for staff on this? Good job, guys.
So we're adding 5W to the list of options, taking
Yes.
out the last sentence of the third paragraph and changing 6.5.1 regarding flag lots.
Consider.
This
Okay.
was quite a bit of data that you included in here, Corey. Thank you.
If you understand it, most of it, you did better than me.
I'll admit some of that backup stuff I just kind of scanned through. Lots and lots of spreadsheets.
Yeah.
All right, turning to the most exciting item on the agenda.
Did I miss
Did
the
you need-
motion?
Would cut
Oh,
it
do we
out.
need to move? Do we not
Kept trying
need to
to cut it
actually
out.
move for this one? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll go for it.
Go for it.
I hereby make a motion that the
I
planning
missed that.
commission recommend the drafted affordable housing ordinance update to the planning commission with the changes that we discussed. Do I need to spell out those changes again?
As discussed.
As discussed and synthesized 130
Lisa.
seconds ago.
Yep.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
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 Sorry.
Just to clarify, so those included the changes in my red line edits, because there were some in that
Yes.
red line that were not in
Absolutely.
this. draft.
Yes.
Sorry, guys, I didn't see a motion in that one.
Yeah, I didn't.
Okay. Now, for the main event, we are moving on to the most exciting item on the agenda.
Main event,
The one that
what-
you have all been waiting for.
Thing
Buckle
that
your
everybody
seatbelts.
came for this morning.
Buckle your
This- oh,
seatbelts. I know. I
sorry.
was like, man, there's lots of people here. Everybody wants to talk about the general subdivision requirement
That's the irony.
ordinances.
This is where the rubber hits the
I
road.
know.
Like this is if they wanted to make changes, this is where it's got to happen.
So, no, actually, this one is an interesting chapter. So I will turn the time over to Lisa.
Great, thank you. So we are at chapter 16. Again, I think I mentioned last time that I've done a little renumbering and moving around, so we still have a couple more chapters to go, but we are getting there. I think we only have 3 more chapters before we do the full re-edit. So this chapter addresses general subdivision requirements, so it's just everything that, all subdivisions generally need to comply with these. It currently exists in Chapter 5 of your existing subdivision ordinance. So this is not a new chapter, but I will highlight what sections are new. So the first 2 sections, referring to the city standards and specifications, we thought, as the review team, that was important. If we're talking about all requirements that every subdivision has to comply with, we should mention our standards and specifications, so that 010 is new. And also that you still have to comply with the zoning code. Even though you're doing a subdivision, you still have to meet all zoning code requirements. So that 020 is also a suggested new section. 030 on subdivision layout, this is pretty much standard, what's in your current code. Not sure if we made any specific amendments, but those are general layout, what we want in each subdivision. 040 regarding lots is also in your current ordinance. And, but what has changed since we drafted this is we've taken out flag lots are no longer permitted, so there is a section there. And then also addressing double frontage lots, which is currently in your code. I'm debating whether to actually pull those out and have their own section number, because we're always trying to find where we deal with flag lots or double frontage lots, and it's not necessarily intuitive just to go to this lot section. So anyway, we may want to pull those out and have their own heading. Then we have the streets and related improvements, just saying you have to put in all these kinds of streets and addressing cul-de-sacs and temporary turnarounds.
Lisa?
Yep.
What is a half street? I mean, I think I knew, but I want to make sure I know.
A half street is when a developer doesn't want to put all of a right-of-way on their property because they really want it to straddle the property line, and so they're coming in and they say, hey, we want to just build half of the street right now. It's not great because you just get,
When
you
does
know,
the rest of the street get built?
yeah, and when does the rest get built? And so we really well, actually in this one, we're being affirmative and saying half streets are prohibited because we've had so much problem with them. But there are some legitimate arguments of, hey, should I really have to dedicate this, 60-foot wide right-of-way when I'm just building, 20 lots? So I think that one may come back where a developer may seek some amendments, but we're taking a stronger stance in this draft. The last section there regarding monuments, we've added just to make sure that's a state code requirement. So the city engineer recommended as part of our street section that we address the required monuments. Protection strips, again, in our existing code. This is another thing we don't really like to use, but we do allow it as an option in unusual situations.
Define a protection strip for me.
So again, this is if somebody decides to put in that whole 60-foot right-of-way, they may leave, if the city approves, a 1-foot gap so that when the next property does come in, if they come in the next 10 years, you can't have these go on and on forever, but if they come back in the next 10 years, then they really need to contribute to a portion of that right-of-way. So that's the protection strip, and they basically, in order to get to the street, have to buy or have that protection strip dedicated.
Got it.
And we've added this new dedication and reservation of land. I think that might have been a city engineer recommendation. And then under drainage, this is from our existing code, but we have added a provision on detention basins as recommended by the engineer. And then section 090 dealing with utilities. These are all the kinds of utilities that they have to put in. Landscaping, building permits, those are very similar to our existing code. Then planned unit development, this is another one where I've struggled, maybe we should even have its own chapter, or, it's kind of hidden in this general subdivision requirements when really it's its own kind of product. But anyway, right now, the planned unit development is in here as well, and this does need some substantial edits. Some things we decided to tackle and some things we decided to punt. So these planned unit development, I don't think we made a lot of changes, knowing that at some point we need to tackle that, but that's a pretty big project. And then again, we have these non-residential subdivision requirements that we kind of add to each year of what they have to put in. And then we also, I think all of the rest, 130 through the geologic hazards, those are all new sections recommended with this new draft. But basically, like on the park strip tree regulation, we're just referencing where we put that in Title IX. And then we added a mailbox and street name referencing Title 11. Again, geologic hazards, this is sort of a Band-Aid. We do need to come up with a more substantial geologic hazards ordinance, but we do have our existing conditions inventory, if you remember Chapter 4, where they do have to come up with most of this information. So anyway, this is just, like I said, a Band-Aid on geologic hazards, but we wanted to address it. So if you have any questions or suggestions or typos, but like I said, most of this chapter we already have. We've just kind of added to it with other items that we thought were important.
For what it's worth, Lisa, I would be in favor of making flag lots and double frontage lots separate sections.
They're separate, so we can
I
just
do.
find it, okay?
I completely agree with you on that. I deal less with, which was the other one that you had said?
PUD.
Yeah, I think if your instinct is to break it out, I'd be inclined to break it out.
Hey, Lisa, I have a question for you, and this is hits on a different topic altogether, but under the utilities and easements, we're telling developers they got to put in all these utilities and get ready for future stuff. Has there ever been any discussion, or is it even legal to say, for example, that as part of these utilities, you got to put in some fiber, so that, if somebody in the future wants to hook up and use fiber Utopia, they could, right? One of the thoughts with that is that, Utopia has already come in, I guess, whoever it is, UIA, has already come through, and they've done most of the city. We build a new subdivision. What's to say that UIA is interested in coming back to that one and filling in the blanks? Or do those people get hung out to dry because they missed the boat?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, I think it would be problematic to put that burden to put fiber in on the developer. I mean, so what we have done is we require them to put the conduit so that it makes it really easy to put it in later.
The conduit, yeah.
Yes.
But is that something that we would address on a development by development type of a basis and not necessarily put into here to say conduit for, or is that in here that I'm missing somewhere? I don't know.
No,
you know what I mean?
I don't think it's in there.
Would it be problematic to say conduit, though?
Is it, you think, on roads?
Yeah, I mean, currently, they're notified to Utopia. Every project's coming in is get a notification to Utopia to work with them providing service, but I don't think we've got the threshold of requiring conduit. The city has, in certain developments, when it was going in, is asked that conduit be put in or help fund some conduit going in, but I don't know if whether we've gone the threshold that says you will put in an additional conduit and who is it dedicated to use that conduit,
Right.
is where I
Who
think we haven't
maintains
got a
it,
clarity on it.
Then you just have more facilities in your right of way, but.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we for sure do it. I just thought that was, it's, in my opinion, that's kind of where we're going. And certainly Centerville is a city that has a lot of fiber, and we need the conduit for that, I guess, so.
I bet if you had, and I think we do, Corey, remember me if I'm wrong, you have to get a letter, will serve,
Yes.
from Utopia. And Utopia, in all the projects I've done, they'll put in the lines. If you just tell them, they'll run it, the whole place, and they'll put in the conduit. And because if you were just to put in conduit, then the question is who owns and who uses
Yeah.
that. CenturyLink might say,
We're gonna use it.
whereas if they put it in, then they own it and they own the rights to it. And so I bet it'd be a complicated mess if, I don't know how that would work.
No, and that's a good point, because with the other utilities, with culinary water, there's only one provider of culinary water. With sewer, there's only one provider of the sewer service. There's, so
Right, and
there's
with
no,
this, you got other,
yeah.
CenturyLink's the worst. So.
That's fine. It was just a kind of a thought discussion, Anyway, thanks.
Great. Do you have all the feedback that you need, Lisa?
Yes.
I had one question, sorry. We have in there, I just barely glanced, I didn't notice this first read through, is right now we require all mailboxes, community mailboxes, to be within 200 feet of the nearest residential unit. And the only reason I would object to that is, in my experience, sometimes it seems more desirable to have it on the way home rather than within 250 feet. Does that make sense? So I'm just thinking of Piney Gardens, where I've previously lived, and I just measured it, and there's probably only 10 out of the 50 households that are within 250 feet. But it was a preferable location because they'd be driving home and they'd want to pull over to it and drop it off. So I would say, just to be safe, raise that. We could raise that number, just because I think the idea is there that no one has to walk forever to get their mail. But in reality, in my experience, a lot of people just drive by the mailbox to pick up their mail. So it may be a misguided effort, but.
Okay, but can I push back on that a little bit?
No, let's go ahead and move forward.
So my sister lives up in Far West, and they have neighborhood mailboxes, and there's like essentially one mailbox area at the mouth of their whole big development. And it looks like this gigantic, huge structure. Yeah, exactly. You might as well engineer a whole new structure you might as well build a new post office. It's big, and so by raising that number or kind of messing with that, you're kind of encouraging these larger and larger and more grotesque looking mailbox structures. And I don't know if, welcome to my neighborhood, here's our mailbox structure.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what we want.
Sometimes that's the post office that pushes that. So I just had a project where we wanted to split it in two for convenience, and the post office said, we'll only service one location.
Well, I know, but I think that we need to, as a city, try and tell,
Even with single-family developments anymore, in my experience, they won't let you put on every lot like they used to in the
You
80s
can't
and
have
90s.
a mailbox on your house.
Just 'cause it doesn't pencil for them
the true
anymore.
rural route is not a thing anymore. But the thing about it is where the federal government, the post office, part of the federal government, they can pretty much do whatever they want to do, as we've talked about in the past. But as a city, I think we need to try and say, this is what we're going to do, and then, set some standards and not just roll over and let the post office have free reign.
Amen, dude. I'm with you. Never mind. Stick with 250.
Well, and I do think that some of these regulations came from the U.S. Postal Service. We were just trying as a convenience to put them in our code, but, maybe that's not a great idea, but, because I think they will be regulated
But
anyway.
I would say stick with the 250 because I don't know that we want.
What happens if the post office says no? Does the city's ordinance have to give then?
Yeah, I can look into that. I think that the Postal Service is probably going to win that one.
Yeah. Well, then maybe it's a moot
They're the
point.
ones that deliver
Yeah.
the mail.
They just
so.
become vertical community gardens if they're not used.
Oh, that's right.
No, but that's my point though, is that we need to set the starting point for negotiation here, and then let's let the post office come in and tell us we're different. And maybe the post office doesn't care, and they're like, cool, 250, that's fine.
Yeah.
But that's what I would say is let's stick with it there and not just right off the bat encourage post mailbox structures.
Yeah.
If we have that regulatory authority.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can look into that.
I don't have a strong objection either way, Logan, because I think you're right. Most people are going to drive, and whether that's at the mouth of the development or spread out, they're still going to drive the same. But if it's closer, then you may get the folks who want to just walk out to their mailbox.
Yeah, and if the post office says we're only doing one, then that probably opens
Yeah.
everything.
That's,
I walk.
listen,
I run to my mailbox.
hey, listen, you could say the same thing about the post office. Don't be lazy, just go to it, all right? I know, that's on YouTube and it's gonna be big now, but.
Making some good friends with the U.S. Postal Service today. Okay, thanks so much, guys. Turning to item number 6 on our agenda, the Community Development Director's Report and City Council Report. Corey.
Here we go. So we do have an item coming in for December 11th, and so if I remember right, somebody made an application for us?
Was it for a waiver of strict compliance?
Yeah, it will, it will be. So I plan on your meeting for there. The amendments were scheduled for the November 19th, and we use the infamous, also known as cargo trailer sales, going to the council on the 19th. So
And
I'll have your report.
just a fair warning to the new commissioners, you should bring a bag to the next meeting. Is it the next meeting?
it is the next meeting.
Yeah.
Which I won't be here for the next
Oh
meeting.
my gosh.
Dang it, I know.
I'm out. Never mind. There's a tradition that Lisa gives huge gifts around Christmas. So just be prepared.
They're candy bars, they're this big.
All right. Wrapping up, last item on our agenda. So October 23rd minute review, page by page, as is the ordinary course. Call out if you have any comments or changes. Anything on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? And I would like to say thank you very much, Kevin, for chairing that meeting while I was away.
Yep.
I move that we adopt the minutes as unamended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Wow, really? It took that long?